Jewish and Muslim faith communities both know all too well what it's like to be targeted because of who they pray to. And those communities could run to their respective corners in the wake of an attack. But Rabbi Bruce Lustig and Imam Mohammed Majid, who run congregations in the D.C. area, have found that relying on each other has helped move their communities past unspeakable tragedy.
Attack in any place of worship is an attack on all the places for worship. Taking one person's life, as it is in the Old Testament, as well as in Islam, as if have taken the life of all humanity.
Muslim American nonprofits have collectively raised more than $200,000 since the shooting in Pittsburgh left 11 Jews dead during Shabbat services. It's wonderful that this community has raised money. Do you feel like it's your responsibility, though, to take care of another community?
You have to remember the Jewish community also stood for Muslims. When this mosque was vandalized after 9/11, and I decided to close the school and suspend, worship services. You know, the first person showed up at the Adam Center was the Jewish community, with big posters signed by their children, saying, "We love you, we'd like you to be here, we support you." This is really this America that I love, that America that I know. And therefore, when I stand with the Jewish community, we're not doing them a favor. This is a community that have stood for many people. We're not doing them a favor. This is natural.
Majid was abroad at a conference when he heard about the shooting at the Tree of Life Synagogue. He says he was so distraught he had to leave the meeting he was in. Lustig was leading a bar mitzvah service when a congregant slipped him a note letting him know what had happened. Was this something that you thought was inevitable, or were you surprised that it happened?
I think in the climate and the environment that we've been living in the last 24 months, I think we're always waiting for the other shoe to drop. It was just overwhelming, the idea that someone would come into a religious service and kill people in the middle of worship.
The attack has forced both men to once again confront the hate directed at their communities.
We can't change the facts. We can only change how we respond to the facts.
Yes.
When people resort to that type of bigotry and that type of hatred, it's a lack of intelligence. It means that they have no other thing to do is to motivate people from fear. Our response is going to be love.
Majid says the two communities have shifted from interfaith dialogue to interfaith solidarity, so much so that they consistently have faith-based activities together. And parts of his mosque, the Adams Center, even operate out of a synagogue.
They talk about the synagogue as a place of worship. To hear that the synagogue was attacked, this Adams was attacked.
Part of that principle is to combat anti-Semitism in less overt ways, like encouraging dialogue between elementary schoolers, one in particular interaction they both remember fondly.
He says, "Those are your 10 commandments." She says, "Yes," and the little girl says, and started to say, the Muslim little girl started to say, "What's in them?" And then the Jewish girl said, "Yeah, aren't those in your Quran as well?" People are scared of strangers, and so we have worked to make sure that our congregants are not strangers to each other. And that's really the way that you combat anti-Semitism and you combat Islamophobia.
It's the shared memories, they say, that will end fear of the other.
We're breaking bread in his home, sitting there and seeing his huge dogs. It's very interesting that if you look to my phone and you look to my contact, you see the word rabbi, 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 rabbi.
For Imam Majid, the real test of their friendship was after an incident in 2017 when a Muslim teenage girl from his community was brutally murdered during a road rage incident. Many believe it was a hate crime. Majid says Rabbi Lustig was one of the most comforting faces during that awful time.
Who gave me a hug in the middle of the service, about to go to the service, and I was really, had a lot of things in my chest, heaviness. And this guy grabbed me in the middle of the sanctuary here and gave me a hug. It was just amazing that to see him in the middle of the crowd and grab me and give me that squeeze. It gave me a lot of energy when I went to and I spoke to the congregation. For the community now, they see our relationship as friendship.
It was, for our congregation, it was as if we lost one of our own children, because we did. because every child in both of our faiths is a creation of God.
Both men preside over communities with political differences, yet they say navigating those waters isn't as hard as you might think.
The truth of our faith is not partisan.
Yeah.
It doesn't sit with Democrats, it doesn't sit with Republicans, it sits with the human soul. And we're about justice, we're about peace, and we're about equality, and we're about love. And those things no political party owns.
Absolutely.
Those are gifts that were given to Islam and given to Judaism through God.
We need to create a compassionate neighborhood. It is in Islam, it's in Christianity, in Judaism, to love thy neighbor. It doesn't say the neighbor has to be Democrat or Republican. It doesn't say the neighbor has to be Muslim or Jewish. It doesn't say the neighbor has to be white or black. It doesn't matter what your lifestyle is. You deserve to be loved and cared for.